The Forum on China-Africa Cooperation, FOCAC, is a platform established to enhance cooperation and dialogue between China and African countries. It was launched in 2000, with a meeting taking place every 3 years since its inception. This year, over 50 African heads of states traveled to Beijing for FOCAC 2024, where the 2024 to 2027 action plan was presented. Here are some post-FOCAC insights from selected scholars in the Africa-China space.
Early September this year, the world once again witnessed the convergence of African and Chinese leaders in Beijing under the Forum of China-Africa Cooperation. I had the privilege to be in China, in Beijing, during this period, and it was really interesting to see the importance the Chinese government has placed on this meeting. For instance, right from the airport, you could see how African flags have been lined up all the way into the Beijing township city, and then for me it was really, really interesting to see so many African government officials come in their numbers for this year's FOCAC. Quite interesting. And for me, it's again a testament to the fact that the Chinese government wants to continue to deal with Africa on a continental basis. It wants to deal with African governments as a whole and not as individual countries. But do African governments want to deal with Beijing as a whole? Do they want to deal with this Asian economic power through the African Union? That is a question that we need to look at, and that is a topic for another day. But again, we saw the two sides come up with policies, especially the Chinese government, again, announcing certain policy initiatives and support for African governments. They again outlined areas they want to focus on, priority areas they want to focus on in dealing with African governments. And one of the very important areas for me is the agricultural cooperation between the two sides.
The 2024 FOCAC Summit has highlighted the expanding partnership between China and Africa and has served as an essential platform for enhancing the socio-economic and cultural ties between the two regions. This year's agenda was highly practical, with a focus on topics like infrastructure, industrialization, digital transformation, and, of course, green development. Each of these areas plays a crucial role in supporting the long-term economic growth and self-sufficiency of African nations through sustainable practices. However, my hope for future summits is that they place an even greater emphasis on the cultural industries and scientific and academic cooperation.
My initial thoughts on this year's FOCAC has been really a lot. First, this FOCAC is happening at a time when a lot of countries are just recovering from the COVID-19 pandemic, but also it's happening at a time when wars have hit the world once again, from Eastern Europe to West Asia to, of course, Africa, to mention but a few regions. The world is once again witnessing a time when political instability is really increasing around the world. But I also thought that this FOCAC was at a really critical moment when the US and China, for instance, are competing a lot, whether being in the Indo-Pacific region or even in Africa. in the Horn of Africa and around the world. So to me, this FOCAC really was unprecedented. But also the other thing is that a lot of the African countries have really high debt levels. Countries like Ethiopia, for instance, have high debt levels. Angola, the Democratic Republic of Congo, Djibouti, to mention but a few. So this year's FOCAC, which was themed joining hands to advance modernization and build a high-level China-Africa community with a shared future, to me was really important. A lot of the African countries, of course, would be expecting China to come and support them economically, either forgive their debts or help them with technologies or buy more of their products. You know, in Nigeria, for instance, there were protests against, the government for the high inflation rates. And we saw the Nigerian president go to Beijing even several days before the FOCAC meeting. So with the expectation that, he could have a side meeting with his counterpart, President Xi, so to potentially find solutions to some of the problems, economic problems that have hit Nigeria in recent years. Kenya had just witnessed a similar situation where there have been protests, again, for economic reasons. So yeah, this FOCAC was really unprecedented, and again, because of the wars that are happening everywhere, my initial thoughts have been also that a lot of the countries would be looking towards China for security reasons. In the Sahel region, as you may all know, we've seen a lot of military coups from Burkina Faso to Niger to Sudan, to mention but a few. A lot of these juntas are, increasingly looking towards Beijing and Russia as they kick out the West from their regions, from their peace and security engagements. So again, Beijing has really been the focus, and I was thinking that a lot of these countries would go to China expecting security engagements and MOUs and all of that. And indeed, if you look at the outcomes of the FOCAC, it's been really a lot more about the people-to-people aspect of things and less of economics. China has promised trainings to military, police, a lot of exchanges. So all of that, I actually had predicted just ahead of the FOCAC.
The FOCAC 2024 highlights the upgrade of China-Africa relations in general. President Xi Jinping has engaged in bilateral discussions with more than 40 African leaders during the summit. China has established strategic partnerships with all African countries except for Eswatini, which next bilateral ties with Beijing. Notably, the relationships between China and South Africa have transitioned to all-round strategic cooperative partnership in a new era. A similar upgraded relationship is evident in China-Ethiopia relations, which was elevated to all-weather strategic partnership in October 2023.
The Forum on China-Africa Cooperation is, I think this year was one of the biggest, because about 50 African heads traveled to Beijing for this particular summit. So as usual, China announced substantial financial commitment to support various initiatives across the continent and outline some key areas also for future cooperation. So as the summit ended, I think the most discussion and critical issues such as sustainable financing and the need for genuine investment strategies to foster long-term growth has emerged as one of the central themes. The summit outcome, which were welcomed by most African leaders, now has reaffirmed China's position as one of Africa's most important development partners. Over the years, it has been the West and the Global South partnership, and the presence of China in Africa now has given a new dynamics to this relationship, or this partnership. So now we could see the big presence of China in Africa in almost all sectors in Africa, and to me, I think is good, looking at the fact that most of the partnership from China now is project-oriented basis, so that it wouldn't be just giving off loans and then you pay, but see to it that the money that they are giving is towards a particular project that will help the general development of African nations.
The FOCAC has led to, if you look at the declaration document, for instance, you see a lot of keywords like globalization, which China has used repeatedly. So in this FOCAC, China has mentioned three key global connotations. The other one is the GDI, which is the Global Development Initiative, and then the other one is the GSI, which is the Global Security Initiative, and then the third is the GCI, which is the Global Civilization Initiative. So by global, again, China is trying to sell its ideologies and its development model to the world, and to get more support for its policies. So now really the focus has happened. China has promised over $50 billion in trade, in financial assistance to the continent, among other commitments. The other task is now to see really how all of these promises how all of these promises will come to fruition or to reality. But I see a few challenges for sure. China being China, transparency has always been a big issue, and also given the nature of these commitments, a lot having to do with military, you're not going to see a lot of such published in the public domain for sure. So that makes it really hard for us to measure any achievements as far as the promises of the FOCAC is concerned. So, but time will tell for sure. Time will tell. But that has been the FOCAC. It has been unprecedented. Let's see what happens.
During this year's FOCAC, and if you look at the Beijing Action Plan 2024-2027, on paragraph 6.1.7, you will see that the two sides have once again affirmed to meet the 20 billion worth of agriculture products exports from China, from Africa by 2030. And we hope that this target will be met by 2030. But since 2001, we've seen that there have been an increase in the importation of agricultural products from Africa into China. For instance, in 2001, we can only talk about 60 million worth of agricultural products being imported from Africa. But by 2020, the records show that there is about more than 3.1 billion worth of agriculture exports from Africa into China, and that for me is good news. Indeed, especially since 2018, we've seen agriculture products from Africa experience very sharp uptick. For instance, in 2022, the Shanghai Waigaoqiao port experienced about more than 1,800 tons of African sesame imports into China. And this is like about a 4.3-fold increase as compared to the previous year, same period in previous year. We've also seen that, Kenya has also exported about 50 million worth of fresh and frozen avocados into China. Since 2021, Rwanda is also exporting chili into China. And we can see that more African countries are exporting commodities like sesame, like chili, like cashew nuts, apples into China. And this is good news. So far, so good. I hope that more African governments will take advantage of China's reduced restrictions on African agriculture products, because over the year they've been very strict quarantine rules and other tariffs, but the Chinese government has lifted some of these rules, and I hope that African governments can take advantage. One of the ways they can do that is to get closer to the Chinese government and get to know what the requirements are. And in similar vein, I hope African governments can research more to know what the market in China demands from the African side, so that we can take advantage of the huge Chinese consumer markets of African products.
First and foremost, I would like to emphasize African agency in such initiatives. African governments should take the lead in coordinating their education and training policy with the evolving demands from the job market. This proactive coordination should inclusively engage women and youth from both formal and informal sectors. Second, Luban workshops should be tailored to suit the labor market demand in African countries. These workshops should closely engage with local, Chinese, and other international enterprises to make sure that their contents are relevant to the labor market demand in African countries.
To ensure that these training programs meet employment demand effectively, they must be context-specific. This simply means aligning the Luban workshops with the realities of local governments. It's therefore crucial that the programs are designed in collaboration with local industries and educational institutions, so that the skills taught are relevant and match existing employment gaps. Luban workshops can offer targeted technical trainings to address specific skills gaps in high-growth sectors. By collaborating with local industries, these workshops could focus on under-resourced sectors like renewable energy, agricultural technology, digital manufacturing, and so on. Fields where trained professionals are in demand. The workshops could also support the creative and cultural industries, which are often overlooked but hold great economic potential. Specialized training in films, for instance, music, fashion, production will support local industries. Now, for the 60,000 training places for women and youth, focusing on digital literacy, e-commerce, entrepreneurship, and so on will give participants or Africans skills to support local businesses and promote self-employment. Scholarships could encourage women to enter technical fields like IT, environmental science, and promote, of course, gender diversity in critical areas for development. Trainings could also emphasize cultural entrepreneurship. So, by approaching urban workshops and training programs this way, African governments and China can really or can better focus their resources, address skill gaps, and really promote economic growth.
One of the most important outcomes that emerged out of this summit was China's pledge to implement about 1,000 small but beautiful livelihood projects to promote sustainable development in Africa. I think this is a very good call, but the question most people are asking is how should African countries navigate sustainable development against the need for big development projects for industrialization in their national context? For me, I think these three important sectors should take the central stage: the energy sector, the agricultural sector, and then the transport sector. So from the energy sector, we should invest in renewable energy. So the focus should be on development of renewable energy, such as solar, wind, small hydropowers, and geothermal. These are already in abundance in Africa and will help us to provide sustainable and clean energy. So this will also create small-scale projects that will empower the local communities through decentralized energy solutions, and it will increase the industrialization, especially at the local front. The other sector I want to touch is the agri sector. I believe that when you look at the employment dynamics, most of the population, or most of the populate in Africa, most of them are employed by this sector, that is the agri sector. So we should focus on supporting the smallholder farmers to get access to emerging technologies, training, and then finance. And also we should have value chain development. I think that is what most African nations are lacking now. So the focus should be on developing agricultural value chains that enhance local processing and add value to raw products. We tend to export our product in the raw form, which do not attract much dividends. So we should add value to them, especially from the local source, even before we move them to the market. So this creates job opportunities in the processing industry, marketing, and then distribution, ensuring that communities benefit from agricultural growth at their community level. And by so doing, it will help us to also set up the big industries at the various towns, which will help accommodating these products from the agri sector. And the last sector I want us to look at is the transport sector. So transport, we should be looking at the public transport expansion, which I think most African nations are on it because of loans from China, and then technological transfer from China as well. And then the other thing is the rural connectivity. Most rural areas in Africa it's difficult to commute. So if you're able to expand these sectors, I believe that it will help with the agri sector and then the energy sector to expand. So it's important that we just do not collect the loans and then it becomes a debt trap for us, but we can put them into this use, especially focusing on these three sectors that I've just mentioned. So by adopting these sector-specific strategies, African countries, I believe, can effectively navigate the balance between sustainable development and industrialization. So the focus on small-scale, community-driven initiatives within the energy, agri, and then the transport sector can create jobs and promote local development. So if we're able to produce most of what we need at the local fronts, I believe that it will reduce the burden on importing such goods from the other countries, which we spend a lot of money importing goods. And if you're able to do that, it's give birth to our industrial development, and then it reduces the burden on foreign dependent products. So this is my thoughts and my submission on the just ended FOCAC meeting in Beijing.